You know, one of the most sinister things narcissists do, and I don't use that word lightly, is manipulate through charm and then control through guilt. It's easy to overlook because on the surface it can feel like love. It can feel intoxicating, flattering, even magical. But underneath that charisma is calculation. Narcissists are rarely sloppy in how they play the game. They know exactly what they're doing. When they first meet you, they don't just like you, they idealize you. They mirror your interests, your values, your dreams. They flood you with compliments. They pay close attention to what lights you up, what makes you feel seen, and they reflect it back like a mirror. This is what we call love bombing, but the term doesn't even fully capture the psychological precision of it. It's not just overwhelming affection, it's weaponized attention, and here's where it gets dangerous. Because what they're really doing in those early stages is gathering information. They're not falling in love, they're collecting data. Every vulnerability you share, every childhood wound you confide, every insecurity that leaks through in a quiet moment, it all gets stored like ammunition. And it's not for intimacy, it's for leverage. Now at some point, the shift happens. It's not always sudden, and that's what makes it so confusing. One day, the jokes get a little sharper, the compliments become conditional, they start testing your loyalty with subtle emotional withdrawals. You find yourself chasing the high of how they treated you in the beginning, wondering what you did wrong, or how to get back to that magical place. And this is where guilt enters the equation, because narcissists don't just manipulate you by making you feel good. They manipulate you by making you feel responsible for when things don't feel good anymore. You'll hear things like, "I just don't feel like you care as much as I do. I've done everything for you, and you're being ungrateful. You used to be different. What happened to you?" These aren't observations, they're accusations. They're designed to make you question yourself, to feel ashamed, to overcompensate, and the more guilt you feel, the more power they gain. That's the trap. That's how charm becomes control. The psychological term for this is emotional coercion, and it's a key tactic in narcissistic abuse. But it's so subtle, so disguised under the veil of just being honest or wanting to fix things, that it can take months or even years before someone realizes what's really going on. You're not in a relationship anymore, you're in a cycle of reward and punishment, with guilt as the main tool of compliance. There's a deeper philosophical issue here too, and I think it's important to touch on, because guilt, when used in healthy relationships, can be constructive. It can help us grow, reflect, course, correct, but narcissists use guilt as a weapon, not a bridge. They use it to limit your freedom, not expand your understanding. That's the difference between guilt that's earned and guilt that's imposed. And when guilt becomes your emotional compass, you stop trusting your own instincts. You start editing yourself. You stop speaking up because you don't want to be too much, or too needy, or too sensitive. You begin to shrink, not because you're weak, but because the game is rigged. And here's the part that hurts the most. Even if a part of you knows something's wrong, the memory of who they were in the beginning keeps you hooked. You keep thinking, maybe I'm the problem, or if I just love them better, it'll go back to the way it was. But that version of them, the charming, attentive, loving person you met, never really existed. That was a performance, a facade, and the longer you stay trapped in guilt, the harder it becomes to see that truth clearly. So how do you break free? It starts with recognizing that guilt is not always a signal of wrongdoing. Sometimes it's a sign that someone else is pulling your strings. You have to ask yourself, am I feeling guilty because I've truly done something wrong? Or because someone wants me to believe I have? That question alone can begin to unravel the spell. You are not obligated to shrink in order to be loved. You do not owe loyalty to someone who uses your kindness against you, and you do not have to feel guilty for choosing peace over chaos, truth over illusion. Remember this: charm without integrity is manipulation, guilt without clarity is control. And no one, no matter how charismatic, how magnetic, how convincing, has the right to make you feel small for having a heart. One of the most psychologically damaging tactics narcissists use, and one of the hardest to recognize when you're in it, is gaslighting. If you're not familiar with the term, it comes from an old film where a husband slowly manipulates his wife into thinking she's losing her mind by changing small details in their environment and then denying that anything's different. That's essentially what gaslighting is. It's the calculated erosion of your sense of reality. Now, why would someone do that? Why would a person want you to question your own memory, your own perception, your own feelings? Simple, because if they can get you to doubt yourself, they can replace your reality with theirs. And once they control the narrative, they control you. Narcissists don't like to argue on facts. They argue on control. And gaslighting is their way of shifting the power dynamic. Let's say you bring something up. Maybe they said something cruel or disrespectful, or they promised you something and didn't follow through. A healthy person would acknowledge, discuss, maybe even apologize, but a narcissist, they'll deny they ever said it. Or they'll say you misunderstood, or worse, you're being too sensitive, too emotional, too dramatic. Notice the pattern. You bring a concern, and instead of it becoming a dialogue, it becomes a dissection of you. Your emotional response becomes the problem, not their behavior. It's a masterstroke in psychological warfare, because now you're defending your feelings instead of addressing the issue. You might start thinking, maybe I did hear that wrong, or maybe I'm just overreacting. And in doing so, you slowly disconnect from your own inner compass. That's the real cost of gaslighting. It doesn't just distort reality in the moment. It causes you to abandon your own sense of truth altogether. What makes this tactic especially cruel is that it often starts small, a comment here, a dismissal there. And because narcissists are usually charming and convincing, especially to outsiders, you begin to trust their version of reality over your own. And that's terrifying, because when you can't trust your own mind, who can you trust? It's important to understand gaslighting isn't always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's quiet. It's the long silences after you express a need. It's the condescending tone when they say, "You're reading way too much into this." It's the subtle, repeated invalidation that makes you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells. It's psychological erosion, not just psychological attack. Over time, you begin to self-censor. You stop asking questions. You stop bringing up how you feel. You even stop trusting the people around you who might point out the red flags. Why? Because the narcissist has made themselves the center of your emotional universe, the only person whose interpretation of events seems to matter. That's how isolation happens, and that's how they keep control. Philosophically, this is where the idea of truth becomes central. Narcissists don't operate in truth, they operate in power. Their version of truth is fluid. It bends to serve their ego. And anyone who challenges that, whether it's with logic, evidence, or simple emotional honesty, becomes a threat. You might wonder, why do they need this level of control? The answer lies in their fragile sense of self. Despite the arrogance and entitlement they project, narcissists often have a deep inner void, a shaky identity that depends on external validation and dominance. Gaslighting is their way of preserving that illusion of superiority. If you start seeing things clearly, the illusion crumbles. So they do everything they can to cloud your judgment, keep you uncertain, and make you believe that they are the only reliable source of clarity. But here's the truth. You don't need someone else to validate your reality. Your experiences are real. Your feelings are valid. If you feel confused all the time, if you feel like you're always the one apologizing, if you're second, guessing yourself constantly in a relationship that's not love, that's manipulation, and the antidote to gaslighting isn't confrontation, it's clarity. It's anchoring back into yourself, into your values, your memories, your instincts. It's keeping a journal. It's talking to people you trust. It's noticing the moments when something feels off and not brushing it aside. It's having the courage to believe your own mind, even when someone is trying to convince you otherwise. Here's what I want you to take away. Anyone who consistently makes you question your reality is not protecting your heart. They're protecting their control. And real love, the kind that's worth holding onto, never requires you to abandon yourself to feel secure. One of the most overlooked yet deeply disturbing things narcissists do, and they do this with surgical precision, is exploit your vulnerabilities. Not by accident and not in moments of frustration. I'm talking about a calculated, ongoing use of your emotional wounds, fears, and desires as tools of control. It usually starts with connection. They'll ask you thoughtful questions. They'll seem unusually interested in the details of your past. They'll invite your trust with their own stories, often exaggerated or completely fabricated, just to lower your guard. And when you open up, when you share something painful, something real, something you don't share with just anyone, that's when the clock starts ticking. Because unlike someone who loves you, who holds your vulnerability like something sacred, the narcissist sees it as leverage, a weakness to be kept in their back pocket, something they can weaponize later when it suits them. And make no mistake, they will use it. Maybe you told them about your fear of abandonment or how you've always felt like you had to earn love. Later, when you express a need or assert a boundary, suddenly it's, there you go again, being needy, or you're just afraid I'll leave you like everyone else. They frame your vulnerability not as something to protect, but as a flaw they have to manage. And that subtle shift is enough to make you doubt yourself all over again. What's so dangerous about this is that it often mimics intimacy, because when someone really sees you, sees your soft spots, your private pain, you want to believe they care. You want to believe that revealing yourself to them created a deeper bond, and with healthy people it does. But with narcissists, it only deepens the illusion of closeness while silently reinforcing the imbalance of power. They don't admire your openness. They don't respect your honesty. They see it as permission to override your boundaries, permission to manipulate your emotional triggers, permission to reroute every disagreement back to your issues. And it's not just your past wounds they target, it's your dreams too. Your ambitions, your goals, anything that lights you up becomes fair game. They'll encourage you at first, even cheer you on. But eventually, you'll notice that your success starts to irritate them. They'll subtly criticize your ideas. They'll downplay your wins. They'll make passive, Aggressive remarks like, "Don't get too big for your boots," or "You've changed." And here's the paradox. You find yourself shrinking to protect the relationship, not because they directly told you to, but because somewhere along the way it became clear that your growth was a threat, not to the relationship, but to their control over it. Philosophically, this comes down to something deeper. The narcissist doesn't want a partner. They want a reflection, a mirror that makes them feel superior, important, needed. When you show too much independence, too much confidence, too much strength, they can't tolerate it, because it shatters the illusion they've worked so hard to build, the illusion that they are the center of your world. So they exploit your pain to keep you small, and they chip away at your joy to keep you dependent. It's not always obvious, and it's rarely done in a single moment. It's death by 1,000 cuts, tiny comments, delayed responses, guilt trips, backhanded compliments, all designed to keep you questioning whether you're too much or not enough. And what makes this especially cruel is that they often do it under the disguise of helping you. They'll say things like, "I'm just being honest," or "You need to hear the truth," or "I only say this because I care." But their version of truth is almost always self-serving. It's not meant to uplift you. It's meant to undermine your confidence just enough to keep you coming back for reassurance. Reassurance that they will never fully give. That's how they maintain control, by creating a cycle where you feel like the unstable one, where you start believing that your vulnerability is a liability, not something to be loved through, but something to be ashamed of. But here's what I want you to hear clearly. Your vulnerability is not a weakness. It's not something to apologize for or hide. It's not the thing that makes you too much. In fact, it's the exact thing that allows for real, authentic connection. And if someone uses it against you, that doesn't mean you need to be less open. It means you need to be more discerning about who you're open with. The right person will never use your past against you. They won't fear your power, your growth, your ambition. They will protect what hurts and celebrate what shines. So if someone makes you feel small for being real, for being human, for being hopeful, that's not love. That's control, and let this land. Anyone who uses your vulnerability to diminish you is revealing their fear of your power. There's a moment, and if you've ever dealt with a narcissist, you'll know exactly what I mean when the mask finally drops. After all the charm, the flattery, the promises, and the manipulation, they reach a point where you are no longer useful to them. And when that moment comes, it is swift, cold, and emotionally brutal. They discard you, and here's the thing, it's not always loud. It doesn't always come with a dramatic breakup or an explosion of anger. Sometimes it's just a slow fade, a wall of silence, an energy shift that says, "You've served your purpose." That silence, that withdrawal of attention, care, or even basic decency. It's not indifference, it's punishment. It's the final act in a long psychological game where your value was always conditional. You see, narcissists don't form bonds, they form attachments to benefits. Maybe it was the way you validated them. Maybe you gave them status, admiration, control, or even just the illusion of being loved. But once that supply runs out, or once you start resisting their tactics, setting boundaries, asking questions, showing independence, the switch flips. And you're not seen as a person anymore. You're seen as a liability. There's a concept in philosophy that speaks to this: instrumentalism, the idea that some people treat others as mere tools to achieve their own ends. Narcissists live in this frame. They don't see people as equals in a mutual exchange of care, vulnerability, and growth. They see people as extensions of their ego. And when you stop feeding that ego, they have no use for you. What's especially painful about the discard is how emotionally sterile it can feel. For someone who once acted as if you were the most important person in the world, texting constantly, flattering you, pulling you close, now suddenly you're met with silence. Or worse, hostility, indifference, blame. You might be left asking, how did they move on so fast? Or did any of it mean anything? And the truth is, narcissists don't move on because they were never in it the way you were. They were invested in control, not connection. In image, not intimacy. And once they feel they've lost control, they'll either discard you or try to replace you. Some even orchestrate the discard long before it happens. They might line up someone new while still in the relationship, creating a safety net for their ego, so they're never without a source of admiration. That's why so many people who have been with narcissists report seeing their ex move on in the blink of an eye. It's not love, it's logistics. They've simply transferred their need for validation to a new host. But the real danger in all this isn't just the discard itself. It's the internalized message it leaves behind. The voice that says, I wasn't enough. That voice is not yours. It's theirs, echoing inside your head. And unless you become conscious of it, you'll carry it forward. You'll find yourself trying harder in your next relationship, overcompensating, thinking love is something you have to earn. But love that is conditional on your silence, your sacrifice, your submission, is not love at all. That's emotional servitude. That's survival dressed up as devotion. And here's something you need to understand at a psychological